Hey, you can get some cool and fun rewards for helping me help kids. Stick around after the video for more information.
The truth will set you free. The truth will set you free.
Hey, I'm Peter Franson from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions. Right now I'm going to attempt to examine the Bible and dissect some of the churchy language we can easily take for granted, digging into history and languages as I'm able to try and get at the heart of the text so we can hopefully then see and apply some of what God has for us in these words today. Now, I'm not formally trained in Scripture. I'm just a guy using resources and a questioning mind to try and get at the truth. That's something that we can all do, so I hope you're continuing to do that with me. We've been going through the book of James and have now arrived at chapter 3, verses 1 through 5 in the ESV reads, "Not many of you should become teachers, my brothers, for you know that we who teach will be judged with greater strictness. For we all stumble in many ways, and if anyone does not stumble in what he says, he is a perfect man, able also to bridle his whole body. If we put bits into the mouths of horses so that they obey us, we guide their whole bodies as well. Look at the ships also. Though they are so large and are driven by strong winds, they are guided by a very small rudder, wherever the will of the pilot directs. So also the tongue is a small member, yet it boasts of great things. How great a forest is set ablaze by such a small fire." Okay, so James' overall point in these verses and in the verses that immediately follow is that speech has a powerful and often destructive influence. Teachers have powerful influence primarily because they speak and claim to know something that is worth being known by others. If they didn't speak and kept their thoughts to themselves, then there'd be no reason to evaluate them more strictly. So, although James mentions a warning for teachers in particular in verse 1, the main issue is that of speech. And the words that follow apply to everyone who communicates their thoughts to others, as is indicated by the way James broadens his intended audience to all believers, brothers, in verses 9 through 12. So we'll look at these verses with all believers in mind, as James seems to have intended, but with an additional application recognized for those who teach. Now, as an aside, on that subject, as someone who teaches Scripture, these verses are pretty personal to me, especially verse 1, in various contexts. First, as a worship pastor for a couple years, and for much longer since then in online ministry, and regularly for the last 15 years, I have taught from the Bible, both verse by verse and topically. I've got a questioning mind, and I get a lot of satisfaction from finding answers and sharing the answers I find to my own questions, as well as helping others find answers to their questions about God and the Bible. But right here is a sobering warning to those who would put themselves in the position of teaching others about the Bible. Again, verse 1 says, "Not many of you should become teachers, my brothers, for you know that we who teach will be judged with greater strictness." The Greek word here for judged is a neutral term like evaluation. It can have either negative or positive results, in the same way that an employee evaluation can lead to warnings or a raise. This is consistent with other parts of Scripture that teach believers about rewards they can accrue or fail to accrue for obedience in this life, received later in their immortal bodies. And for more on that, you can see 1 Corinthians 3, verses 11 through 15, and 2 Corinthians 5, verse 10. A primary reason teachers are evaluated more strictly is because they talk more regularly, which again is really the main topic of this passage. James brings up teachers presumably because there were a number of believers in his audience who were pursuing that role in their communities. But his remarks about teachers in verse 1 seem to primarily be a tool for introducing the topic of speech in general. Verse 2 says, "For we all stumble in many ways, and if anyone does not stumble in what he says, he is a perfect man, able also to bridle his whole body." Now, commentators interpret this verse at least a couple different ways that I've seen. The first that I've seen is that this basically is saying we all sin, And verbal sin is the hardest to avoid. In fact, it's so hard to avoid that if someone theoretically can manage to avoid that sin, then they certainly must have mastered all other forms of self-control. We might as well call them perfect. It interprets the verse as a sort of sarcastic statement. The second interpretation I've seen is that this verse is saying we all sin, but verbal sin has a way of affecting all other parts of our lives. And so when someone avoids a verbal sin, they are avoiding many other sins as well in the process. So this would be a non-sarcastic observation about the effects that verbal sins have on the rest of our lives. The common ground between the two interpretations is that verbal sin is easy to fall into and can have really intense effects. Verses 3 through 5 again say, if we put bits into the mouths of horses so that they obey us, we guide their whole bodies as well. Look at the ships also. Though they are so large and are driven by strong winds, they are guided by a very small rudder wherever the will of the pilot directs. So also the tongue is a small member, yet it boasts of great things. How great a forest is set ablaze by such a small fire. Continuing verse 2's bridle metaphor, James illustrates how controlling our words leads to control of all of our actions. Then, using metaphors of a ship's rudder and a forest fire, he reveals the power and control our words have over our mode of operation. Okay, so looking at these verses, I always want to ask, what's in all of this for geeks, specifically maybe? This was really interesting for me to try and think about with a fresh mind, this passage here. I knew that our words could have a powerful effect on others, but I asked myself, how do my own words affect my course of action? Do I see anything similar among other geeks that I interact with in what I observe in myself? My mind quickly reflected on my tendency to be more invested in the convictions or ideas I express to others. Once I've put a thought out there, either publicly or in my work, I should say, or just talking to friends and family, offline, my pride is on the line a little bit. Once I've put myself out there and stated something that I believe, I'm on record as having said A, right? So if someone says, well, A is not true, and they have good reasons for saying that, well, now I've got the choice to either dig my heels in and defend the fact that I said A, or admit that I was wrong to at least some degree. I'm sure you've run into a situation like the following on forums and other online places. Two people, maybe you're one of them, are going back and forth about some topic, each with differing views. At some point, one of them seems to get a little more intense and opinionated in how they express themselves, and a sort of point of no return is reached, where you can tell that one or both parties are clearly not open to persuasion or modifying their view in any way. It could be a conversation about the Bible or Batman, but this kind of exchange, I think you'll agree, is pretty common. Now, maybe the person digging their heels in has good reason to, because they are in fact correct in their view, assuming that it's a fact-based topic and not an opinion topic, which we geeks can get confused about. But I think it's worthwhile for all of us to consider our tendency to dig our heels in when we shouldn't, once we have verbalized our view on something. The power of words can also lead to good things, however. For example, knowing that I will be sharing my weekly waistline measurement with my wife and with listeners of the Christian Geek Central podcast leads me to commit to making better eating and exercise choices throughout the week. Once I have said I'm going to do something, I'm more likely to do it, just in general. Of course, that can still be wrongly motivated by pride, so that's worth considering as well. I guess my point is a basic one that we all really know already, but we just needed to be reminded of repeatedly. And that's so much of what we see in Scripture is God saying again what He's already said, because we forget, and so we need a reminder. So I guess that would the main focus I would want to, main thing I would want to observe is something that you and I already know, and that is that it's worth considering our words before we speak or type them. The internet has made it so easy to feel safe in just firing off our words like reckless machine gun spray. But the consequences of those easily sinful words can lead us to more sin in further and deeper ways, having a much greater and longer lasting effect than we had anticipated. Peter Franson here from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions. For my 6th consecutive year, I'm participating in Extra Life, a charity event that raises funds to provide medical care for children in urgent need. I'm also leading the Christian Geek Central Extra Life team, which you're still welcome to join by following the link in the description below. Once again this year, I'm drawing attention to our team's fundraising by performing a 24-hour marathon of video gaming that I will stream live on youtube.com/ChristianGeekCentral and ChristianGeekCentral.com beginning 6 a.m. Pacific Time on Saturday, November 2nd. You can donate on my page or on any team member's page by following the links below, where you will also find incentives and rewards for doing so. For example, on my page, for $5 or more, you can choose a topic to add to my +3 page of many topics that I'll be blabbing my opinions on during the live stream. For $10 or more, you get the previous reward and a download code for a free copy of the Spirit Blade Special Edition audio drama. For $20 or more, you get the previous rewards and you can choose a game for me to play during my November 2nd live stream. Pick a favorite or torture me with something terrible or rage-inducingly difficult. For $30 or more, you get the previous rewards and you can choose a song for me to sing during my November 2nd live stream. Pick an old favorite of yours or just make me humiliate and torture myself with something no one wants to hear. And for $50 or more, you get all the previous rewards and a download code for every MP3 product at spiritblade.com. That's an $80 value. On top of that, I've set fundraising milestones that will unlock strange and unusual happenings as I reach them. At $200, I'll have a free download day for everyone who visits spiritblade.com on November 6th. And as my total goes beyond $200, I'll unlock increasingly more content for that free download day. I will also let my boys tickle me for 1 minute straight during my November 2nd live stream. And depending on how far beyond $200 my fundraising goes, I will cover my face in peanut butter and jelly while talking about horror movies, put on a Frozen Solid t-shirt the morning of my live stream while playing video of me singing soothing classical music at my senior recital in college, shoot water up my nose with a turkey baster, get my wife Holly to play a game with me for 30 minutes of the live stream, or the granddaddy of all milestones, squirm intensely, mortified while showing an embarrassing video clip from the original stage version of Spirit Blade. Now, there are some stipulations and time limits on those rewards and milestones, so quickly follow the link below to my fundraising page for all the details. I hope you'll be a part of helping me and the Christian Geek Central team do some good for some kids who really need it. And then, please join me at youtube.com/ChristianGeekCentral for my 24-hour marathon starting at 6 a.m. Pacific on Saturday, November 2nd. Hope to see you there. If you'd like some help finding a good church in your area, I would love to help you do that if I can. Online resources and communities are good supplements, but by nature they just can't speak to your particular situation like relationships in a local church can. The context for almost everything in the New Testament assumes that we're serving and building purposeful relationships in a local church. So whether you're in a church that just kind of lacks Bible-based intentionality or maybe not attending any church at all, if I can help you get connected to an authentic, compassionate, Bible-oriented church, I want to do that. You can email me at paeter@spiritblade.com, and we can look at some websites of churches in your area together.